And okay, so I want to do another little reflection video about the last two sessions that I ran. I think they went pretty well overall. So first thing that happened was on Thursday we had everyone sort of dress up in costume. It was really nice. We had Naomi, sort of dressed up as a doctor. We had Orfeo, dressed in like a coat and like a hat, It's cool. And we had, Jean was Jean, in the same kind of coat that he wore last time. So it was cool. We hung out in the guy who plays Otto, his dorm. We were doing that for a while. We were in his dorm for like a really long time, and there were like balloons and streamers everywhere, so it was sort of distracting. They kind of all like played around with all the balloons and threw them everywhere and stuff, but it wasn't really that bad. I don't think it distracted to the point where it got annoying. I mean, a bit, but I don't think it really ruined the entire session. I wouldn't blame the balloons for that. Um, Anyway, what was the other thing? They basically all showed up in costume, so I gave them all like extra points for that because they all kind of were wearing like these really hot, sweaty, big outfits, and I was like, oh, I feel bad. The only one I think who didn't have a costume was Otto, but I mean, I didn't want him to show up in like a police officer's uniform and stuff like that because that might look a little weird, or I don't know if I would look right, or we might not be able to find something like that would fit. We'd have to get a uniform and be kind of complicated, and it might not be comfortable. So there's that whole thing. I mean, it's not like, I mean, he has a gun. That doesn't mean I want him to pull out like a fake gun when we have this thing. So it's sort of a thing where I don't think I'd want him to come in uniform and like have like a real policeman's gun, because that'd be over the top and ridiculous. Anyway, point is, we had a pretty good session Thursday. It was kind of slow because I had to start looking up some rules and stuff, and that kind of slows down the game. But I kept trying to tell them, I'm not in the mood to rush this out. I want to make sure I get the rules right, and I want to make sure that I understand them, and I want to make sure that we have this thing worked out. Beyond that, I think the major stuff that happened in the session was that they were interrogating this demon guy. Jean used his basically his dragon power on him to force him to tell the truth, because he can basically make oaths almost like a geese, and he has this sort of, he can bind them to a promise. And so he forced him basically to tell the truth. So they ended up getting a bunch of information out of him. He mentioned how basically the guy he works for, Gillen McAllister, basically legally made himself Naomi's godfather, and Orfeo, once he figured out about that, he literally told me, I'm gonna make a composure roll, and if I fail, I'm just gonna go into frenzy. So he failed multiple times that session. By the way, he failed his composure rolls. He started to just freak out. There was a glass barrier between him and the interrogation room. He started smashing this bulletproof glass with his bare hands. Get me in there, I want to get in. And he's smashing against this glass, and Jean had to run over and grab him and try to hold him down. I mean, they both had super strength at that point, so it was sort of him trying to wrestle against this guy who was also super strong. It was kind of a cool moment. It was a bit ridiculous because at one point, Orfeo just had his whole body. He was thrashing himself at this glass. He started using his head. He kicked at it. He used all of his body parts like this big frenzy. Or Jean was telling him, you could roll this and you could do offhand attacks with your other foot. It was this really ridiculous thing where he just started thrashing at it, and it was with all of his body. So eventually his legs were inside the glass, and then he broke it with his head. It was horrifying to watch, and he spent a whole bunch of blood points to boost his strength so he could do that. It was hilarious. The Otto basically escorted the guy out of the room. And what they decided was he keeps going on like, oh, I want my phone call, and he's like, you know what, I'm gonna put you on psych evaluation because you're probably just freaking nuts. You're talking about all these demons and whatever. So they're putting him like officially, they're putting him on psychological evaluation, and basically they're gonna like hold him there in the system for a really long time. And then they went back to the clinic to sort of pick everything up, and they told Naomi, okay, listen, you're going to stay with us now at this manor we have. And she's like, you know what, okay, I don't mind, I guess. And Marissa's going with her, too. So effectively, they just collected all this junk from their houses. When they went back to the clinic, they checked the window, where the window was. And effectively, I think Orfeo, he like licked the window so he could get like a blood, literally like a blood sample. And with the blood sample, he was able to figure out a few things. Like, this guy is obviously whatever he is. He's kind of immortal, so he's not like he looks like he's like 20, 30 something, 40 something, but he's probably been alive for like maybe 90 years, something like that. Um, The other thing, I think that Marissa actually saw him coming up the window, so what I explained was that, okay, you do remember seeing something weird, so I had her make a few rolls. She passed. Um, I said, you actually remember he didn't, like, when you saw him go up the building, you think, in your head, you're like, oh, he climbed up the building, but then when you really, like, try to remember, you realize that, like, what you remembered wasn't, like, the truth. What you remember now that you kind of realize, like, you dig back into your head and you realize, like, the truth, because she has sort of a supernatural sense for these kind of things. She's associated with witches before, so she's not as uninclined as a normal mortal. She sort of realizes, like, okay, he walked up the side of the building. Like, there's no, like, place where he could have, grabbed on. He literally, like, you saw him walk up the side of the building, it was ridiculous. And she, like, kind of explained that to them, and they're like, oh, okay, well, that's interesting. So they figured that out, and then they go back to to Marissa's apartment. They collect her stuff, and then basically we ended the session by having this big introduction to the manor area. After that, we ran the session on Friday, which was, I think, a little more, cool, because that one was a lot more chill. Like, it's a completely different atmosphere playing with, people in person and then people on Skype, and then versus people who I'm new with and people who have been my friends for a few years. So we did that with Xanthus and Ignisco, the werewolf and the mage, detective, freelance guy. And so with the two of them, we sort of had this scene where I wanted to sort of try to get them together. I was gonna do it in more of a like a dramatic sense, like, oh, you both happen to be headed towards the same goal. But in this case, I wanted to keep it kind of low key because Ignisco's pretty violent, and if he actually saw like Xanthus in the middle of some action, he might just literally murder him because he's playing a villain. They're both sort of anti-hero-ish, these two characters. So what I decided was that I basically said, the spirit told you to find somebody who knows more about these creatures. So he asked his werewolf contact, to, like, give him some information. The guy opens up the phone book. He's like, well, I know this guy Xanthus. He does these investigations. Maybe you should ask him. He probably knows something. So he goes to... So he searches through the city, he finds the address, because the address was there. So he goes to the address, he, goes in, and Xanthus immediately can, like, sense this guy is very hostile. Like, he gives off this hostile energy. So then Xanthus rolls to do mage sight on this guy, and he figures out, oh, it's a very powerful, thing. Probably a werewolf, because it has very dense spiritual energy. Like, that's not common for a mortal being. Or, the aura is very significant and very powerful. It's not like a normal being's aura. So he definitely could tell that it was supernatural. And he said that he's probably dealt with werewolves before. So he probably would guess that it's some sort of werewolf or something like that. So he's like, okay, your thing. Well, I mean, he wasn't actually sure he was a werewolf, but I mean, it was pretty obvious based on the predatory aura that he was picking up, and like the energy, and like the way the aura looked, and the type of power that he was giving up. So it was like, okay, so you need my help. Give me something in exchange. I'll help you. He gave him, like, originally Ignisco just gave him the riddle that I gave Ignisco, and I was like, well, what is something that people control, but in reality it controls them. So the people who think they're in control of it, actually it will control them. And so out of character, Xanthus figured out, oh, it's probably demons. And so, I gave him another point, because he guessed that he knew out of character, like, what it would be. He was like, it's probably either, I told him, well, it's probably either ghosts, spirits, or demons based on his role. He got like 7 successes or something ridiculous like that. So it was like, okay, you definitely understand what's going on here. It has something to do with demons. And he was a demonologist, so I'm like, you're fairly sure, you're getting into something that you can handle. Like, on it, like, not something you can handle, but something like, oh, you know a lot about this. So, what he ended up doing was he said, okay, give me something that I can trade. Because he didn't have any money. So then Ignisco gives him this knife, and he's like, this is, that he had in his inventory. He's like, this is my dad's knife. Don't lose it. And so Xanthus is like, okay. So he takes the knife. Then they go outside. Oh, actually, no. Before we went outside, he got a call on the phone that told him, okay, oh, my dog went missing. It ran off its leash and whatnot. So he's like, oh, okay. I mean, I didn't really expect him to. I didn't really expect him to respond to that as quickly as he did. But I guess Xanthus is pretty desperate for a job, so he'll take pretty much anything as long as they pay him. So, they're like, oh, we got a job, let's go. So I'm like, I guess he's going that way then. So they're on their way out, and then these two guys, like, basically, like, are at his door, and they're like, well, where's the money? We want the rent money. And he's like, I paid you guys, leave. And so right before this guy is about to come down with him with a pipe, Ignisco, like, walks up, and he's like, hey, step off. And he uses his gift to, like, pull out his claws, and so he has this ability where he can use his claws in human form and, like, freak people out. So they had to roll against lunacy, because in World of Darkness, if you see a werewolf, you just predatorily, like, you think, okay, I've got to run away from this. So they actually got a whole ton of dice to roll against this, but they still failed. So they all just they booked it. They, like, ran. They're like, screw this, we're out of here. So the one guy, like, jumps into his car and drives away. The other guy freaking drops the pipe and, like, runs down the street. And they don't go after him, because Ignisco doesn't like fighting in the daytime, for one thing, because that's one of his bans. The other reason is because, they didn't want to just kill this guy for no reason. So he runs into a building, and they just sort of walk off to go do this job, and that's where I ended them. So right now, I got a lot of cancellations for Thursday. So what I'm basically gonna be doing is going back to Xanthus and Ignisco for Friday, and then that's about it. So I'll probably post something around that time. Other than that, it's a pretty good session. We got some good, dialogue between things that are going on. They're learning more information about, like, the big, plot kind of that's going on right now. And we have kind of have everyone starting to settle into a niche, like a place, like everyone's sort of starting to fit together. Like Ignisco and Xanthus were originally going to be, completely separate, but now I kind of put them together so that when the characters are together, they can at least operate like sort of a team. Even though Ignisco is not really a team player, and neither is Xanthus. It's kind of funny that we see these two really, like, selfish people sort of working together. I kind of like that. I mean, Ignisco isn't really selfish. He is, like, in a pack, but it's more like he's really aggressive. It's like we have this really aggressive, intelligent guy, though. He's not, dumb. He's not like a brute. He's actually, like, really thoughtful, but very brutal if you get him angry. He's sort of like that. His vice is wrath, so you don't want to make him mad, but he's not actually like a brutish guy. He's actually thoughtful about who he attacks and why. So it's cool. But yeah, I think it's kind of interesting that we have these two characters that are sort of would never work together in a team, that are sort of now, in a group, which I like because then those two players don't have to be separate all the time, and it'd be easier to pull them into one direction than have both of them go in two different directions. It makes it a lot easier for me to like plan around that. Anyway, that's all for this session. I'll catch you guys, I think, a few days one after I finish the game on Friday, and we'll see where it goes.